Hey, what's up? This is Chosen, and we have got patch 11.009 coming up later this week, so actually just in a few days. So I'm going to give you some context as to how this patch is going to be affecting team games. There's already 100 YouTubers that do patch notes coverage in relation to the game in general and specifically focused on 1v1. So I'm going to talk about team games because I think that's a lot of what people out there are playing, the 2v2s, the 3v3, 4v4, stuff like that. So that's the context I am going to discuss these patch notes in. Let's get into it. Alrighty, so first up, they're kind of saying the typical stuff here. And if you want to read through this, the whole patch notes, I'll link it down below if you want to pull it up. But I'm going to try to skim through and get to the main talking points of this. And this first one under general is obviously going to be a big deal. We've got animation canceling issues. So we've made improvements to the animation canceling previously called out by the players. We'll be keeping an eye out for your feedback. But with this patch, units can no longer easily perform faster attacks than intended by issuing a move command after attacking to cancel the cooldown between hits. This was most notably abused with scouts early game, trying to snipe villagers that are usually building docks or somewhere exposed, and you'd have a couple scouts sit there, attack, animation cancel, attack, animation, and scouts were doing way more damage than they're supposed to be doing at 1 minute into the game. You'd also see it with things like elephants and knights, and this animation canceling was super effective, and it was basically, if you're in a high level game, you have to do it, because if they're doing it and you're not, you're just at a massive disadvantage, and you're probably going to lose if it's any sort of a close game. So it is nice. I think the players in general want this fixed, and it's going to be a good change that most of us are on board with getting in the game as soon as possible. Fix the bug where palisade walls couldn't be targeted. Yeah, that was not super common, but what would happen for sure. And then trebuchets getting a little bit of an adjustment here. The projectiles will now deal area of effect damage when missing their intended target. Trebuchets definitely need a little bit of a change. I think they should adjust how much they cost. They're way too expensive for how slow and niche and situational they are. I would just bring down their cost a little bit along with this change. Honestly, it would have been fine. It's not like Trebs are ever going to be broken. They're way too slow and they take way too long to do anything. You need so much map control to go ahead and get any utility out of them, and they're so bad in so many different situations that they're just never going to, just by concept, they're not going to be broken unless they made their range like 50 or something. But the way the Trebs currently function, I would have done this and reduced their cost just a little bit. I still don't expect that we'll be seeing trebuchets used a lot in the game. They're still going to be super niche. Then we get into the demo ships. Fix the bog where incendiary ships range increase significantly after researching explosives. Yeah, you'd get once you get the fully teched out demo ships, they would be blowing up land units from 10-15 tiles away, and it was just ridiculous. So they're going to be adjusting that. Fix the bug where incendiary ships were exploding 2 or more even times in some cases. Yeah, just doing way more damage than you expected them. So good that they're going to be adjusting those. And then scout cost increased from 60 to 70 food. Yeah, I like that. We're starting to see like a lot of people opening 2 scouts to go ahead and try to get an advantage on sheep, steal sheep from your opponent. I'm okay with that change, and also there's some weird strategies out there involving mass scouts. So let's get some adjustments to that. 60 to 70, I think that's a fine change. Then under the fishing section here, actually some pretty big changes coming right here. So first, changes to shorefish. We are going to be getting a pretty big reduction here from 0.75 to 0.66, and shorefish are going to run out a lot faster. Shorefish do not replenish like deep sea fish, so they're going to last half as long, from 1,000 to 500. That's a massive nerf to shorefish. And then also deep fish not being left alone, we're going to reduce it from 1.1 to 1.0, so I'm not going to gather quite as fast. And again, half as much. They're going to be changed from 2,000 to 1,000 food. So when you're on a map like Black Forest and whatnot, all of those fishing boats that you build in the back of your base, they're going to run out like basically twice as fast because the food is going to be halved. So a pretty massive change to how impactful docks are going to be over the long haul of the game. Still going to be super impactful early game, that first 10 or 15 minutes, but how long they're going to last and how long the impact will be helping you before you have to transition to things like farms, that's going to be a massive nerf because they're not going to last near as long, being halved. And then under siege, which obviously we all know that siege needs to be addressed in some shape here. So we've got the formation catch-up speed reduced from 100 to 40%. So what happens is when you've got a bunch of units selected, or they're in a certain control group or something, and you're moving them around the map, when they start to get out of formation and stuff, you'll have units that they have this mechanic where they catch up. So they get a speed increase to kind of catch up and stay in formation, and they're going to be reducing that for siege. So there's going to be more opportunities where siege kind of gets left unprotected if it's not being paid attention to. It's going to be more punished for players that aren't really babysitting their siege, which I think is a good change. I like that for sure. And then Horseman, Camel Rider, Pyromancer, and Night Torch bonus damage versus siege. So basically just buffing up the cavalry here, but and how fast they are going to be burning down siege, which is definitely a good change. You'll see way too often that, especially with how villagers can repair siege and how fast that occurs, really important to give us more counterplay and reward people getting cavalry into good positions to counter siege. So definitely a good change here. It's a big buff too, from plus 10 to plus 20. So that's pretty big. Going from 10 to 20 is doubling. So I really like that that buff, and siege is going to die a lot faster to cavalry if you leave it out of position. And then Bombard health reduced from 480 to 400. So obviously this is going to be for the normal Bombards in the game. The Chinese Clock Tower Bombards have a different amount of HP. I'm sure that'll be addressed down below. But yeah, pretty big nerf. Not only are we going to be able to kill siege faster based on the cavalry bonus torch damage, which they could have probably given infantry a little bit more damage as well, but they probably want the more realistic mechanic of siege being kind of outflanked and outpositioned by cavalry to really be used as a sniping unit to deal with the siege and kind of get behind the back line there. But coupling the bonus cavalry torch damage and the lessening of health, and it's pretty significant. 480, 10% of that is 48, and it went down by 80. So you're talking about like somewhere between like 15 to 19% less health here for Bombards, and they're going to take more damage from cavalry. So there's a lot more options to deal with siege here, especially if they're not going to be babysitting it. But siege weapons are also going to be now deal their bonus damage versus ships to kind of help with some of that counterplay on maps like Danube River, where you've got that big middle area with the rivers all around you. Siege is going to be way more effective versus the ships that are there kind of patrolling and trying to lock down land units. Then we get adjustments made across the board to siege movement speed. Bombard move speed reduced from, that's a pretty big nerf. So bombards are going to be way more susceptible to damage. They're going to have less HP, and they're going to move way slower just in general. That's a big nerf, 0.88 to 0.62. And then Springolds are going to move a little bit slower. I mean, that's not really that necessary of a change, but I guess you don't want siege to be worthless. The Springolds are already faster, so that should be fine. Mangonel, as long as they're slower than Springolds, which is good. So if we're going to be lowering Springolds, we definitely have to lower Mangonel, and they are going to stay slower, so that's fine. And then Nesta Bees reduced a little bit here as well, just to kind of keep pace with the other changes going on. So yeah, that's all of the general changes. Now let's get into some Civ specific stuff, and I'll wrap it up here at the end and talk about some things. But first, we're gonna start with the Abbasid, the age up time reduced from 120 to 105 for every age. I think that's good. I think that's about right. It's going to help them kind of stay ahead and snowball and boom even better than they already do. It's a cool mechanic of them as a civilization, so that should be a good change there. Then we get the Abbasid and the Delhi getting some shared changes because they both have Dows. We're going to be getting the explosive Dow detonation range from 1 to 2 to match the intended explosion radius, and then a damage increase for Dows from 8 to 10. Berry harvest bonus from 25 to 30 and carry capacity up. That's big. The Abbasid and the Delhi really rely on those berries that are close so they can kind of defend themselves, and that's a big change for both those civilizations. Delhi was already being really strong on certain maps, so that's definitely going to make Delhi even better than they already were kind of rising up. And Abbasid getting a couple small tweaks here to be a little bit better as well. Then for the Chinese, the Clock Tower Bombard going to be reduced from 720 to 600. Now, they still have a lot of health. Remember the original, or the normal Bombards got nerfed from like 480 to 400. So The Chinese have bombards with 600 instead of 400, so they from the clock tower. So they are still very good bombards, but they are going to be nerfing that in line, just to keep pace with the normal bombards getting less health as well. So totally expected change there. And then the official unit is no longer going to be able to supervise landmarks. This is going to be most notably affecting the clock tower siege, where you put an imperial official on your clock tower landmark, and then you can just crank out the Chinese amazing siege units. So no longer going to be able to do that. The Chinese are just going to have to go with their base landmark and the bonuses that it provides, with the production speed and the bonus HP. Then reload drills, bonus, reduced. So this is an upgrade the Chinese have. It's going to reduce that from 33 to 20. I agree with that. That should make them a little bit less oppressive. Nest of Bees damage versus ships. Well, they're going to be increasing that to keep pace with the other changes they made. Fixed a bug where Imperial official tax collection cooldown sometimes didn't trigger. This was super annoying for anybody that plays Chinese when this would happen. The bug where you got to sit here and mess around with your Imperial official to get this to work again. So it's always good that that's getting addressed as well. Then the HRE increased Prelate base move speed from 1.0 to a 1.12. That's a 12% movement speed buff. That's really good. It's going to make it even easier for them to get relics back into the Regnites Cathedral, which a lot of people think is already a super ridiculously strong landmark. So, you know, HRE is kind of viewed as very underwhelming until they get a three relic Regnites Cathedral, and then they're extremely strong. So it's going to be even easier for them to get to that point. So definitely a significant buff to HRE. The inspired cast range also going to be more consistent from 3 to 4 tiles. That's a big improvement. When the numbers are that small, just going up by 1 is a massive improvement. So HRE was already kind of trending upward, and this is a pretty sizable buff to them, I think. And then lastly, we've got the Mongols and the Rus here on this last screen. The Mongols are clear in a way the strongest overall civ in the game. They have been for a while now, pretty unanimously viewed that way in the entire age community here. But they're going to be adjusting raid in this patch. So first, the base raid ability reduced from 50 to 25. The raid bounty upgrade bonus is going to be reduced. So even when you upgrade the rating, it's only going to be what the base level of rating it used to be. So you're going to have to upgrade to get to that base bonus, basically. And then the raid bounty improved that you can get from the Uvu radius bonus is going to be decreased from 100 to 75. So you can still get above the current base level, but you would have to be around the Uvu's influence to go ahead and get that by investing stone into that upgrade. So like all in all, this is fine. It's not the adjustment that Mongols need. They're going to need... Mongols are going to be broken until there is some sort of, well, maybe not broken, some people would argue super strong. They're going to be super strong until there is adjustments to their Uvu. Like, it needs to have something change about it, how fast the double units produce, or how much the production of the double units costs, or how fast the Uvu generates stone. Something revolving around the Uvu is going to have to happen to get the Mongols back down into balance. This is not really going to change a whole lot about them. It is a nerf, but like their win rate is going to go from 56.8% to like 56.2%. Like, sure, it's a nerf and it will make them a little bit worse, but it's not gonna bring them into balance in the grand scheme of things, in my opinion. And then for the Rus, we're just getting one change at the high armory technology, which is their tier 4, their age 4 landmark, which is fine-tuned guns reload bonus reduced. So this is going to be happening because of the change they made to the Chinese bombards. They just want to be consistent across the board. If they're going to be nerfing the upgrade for the Chinese, that same kind of themed upgrade is also going to be nerfed for the Rus as well. So you know, unfortunately for you Rus players, another nerf coming down here for the Rus. They got hit pretty hard. I've been seeing them a lot less in team games since the last patch, addressing their super popular fast castle horse archer strategy. Rus used to be in probably like 80 to 90% of games in terms of like 3v3 and 4v4. Now the Rus are in like probably 25-30% of my games that I'm playing. So they're getting picked a lot less just from my anecdotal playtime of games on the ladder, and unfortunately another nerf here, but it needed to be done just to keep pace with the change that was done to the Chinese bombards. So now let's quickly go over like the biggest things I think are gonna change in team games. First of all, the massive changes to fishing. Docks are super impactful, but they're not going to be nearly as impactful. They're still going to be good, but I mean, this was pretty big changes to docks. So like in those situations where maybe you lose your dock or things happen where you get behind your opponent on water, you're still going to be at a disadvantage, but it's going to be a little bit more realistic to climb back from that disadvantage. So like all in all, I think it should be okay, but I think people are going to be a little bit hesitant to like this because it's a little bit heavy-handed. They could have maybe tried tweaking it a little bit instead of kind of slamming fish like this, but we'll have to see how it plays out. And then I think the adjustments to Siege, all in all, were pretty good. The Chinese were super oppressive by massing out 10, 15 bombards late game. I would have preferred to adjust their supply count. Just make bombards cost 1 more supply. And then when somebody builds 10 bombards, now they're basically playing the game with 190 supply compared to their opponent having 200. If you make it take 1 more supply for those bombards, that would make it a little bit more costly for you to have all of that army space chunked up by bombards, and it would make it a little bit easier. You'd have 10 more supply to try and counter that siege, but this should work fine too. I would have maybe started with the 1 more population space, but this was, you know, there's going to be a lot more counterplay with siege in terms of its relation to cavalry and being burned down a lot faster, coupled with the increase of damage, and also how much slower siege is going to move and how much less HP it has. So it's still going to be on maps like Mountain Pass and stuff where it's just a straightforward siege ball. It's still going to be really oppressive and really good because of the pop change that didn't occur, but it is a step in the right direction for sure. Like Delhi was already becoming pretty strong, and this is a pretty big buff to them, especially early game, gathering all those berries. So I think Delhi's going to move up the board a little bit here, and Abbasid aging up faster is definitely a welcome change to them. I mean, think about it. It's 15 for every age. So you're talking about getting the castle 30 seconds faster every single game just as a passive bonus. So yeah, it's going to be good for Abbasids, and I think it's kind of a small little tweak that they needed, and Dowels are going to be a lot better now. Going from 8 to 10 is a big change. Chinese got hit hard by the siege kind of bombard adjustments, but they were broken. They need to be adjusted. So like, you know, Chinese are still going to be an A tier civ. They're going to be solid. They're just not going to have the ridiculous broken supervised clock tower crank out 20 bombards ridiculousness. But bombards are still going to be really good, and Chinese in general are always going to be a pretty solid civ. HRE was already moving up the board. They're going to be even better now. It's going to be even more realistic for them to fill up that Regnitz Cathedral and get 3 relics in it as soon as possible. They should be able to do that, like you're going to lose to like prelates to wolves less often with this increased movement speed. It's going to be tougher to catch them out on the map. So yeah, I think it's a good early game tweak to help HRE get to that point where they're really strong. And then also the Inspire cast, that's a big buff to their early game economy for sure. So I think it's going to be yeah, I think it's mostly going to be a good thing. I think HRE needed a little bit of love to kind of get to that point where they're really strong. And then Mongols, I mean, you know, the changes are welcome, but they're still going to be insanely strong. Mongols are still going to be the best civ. This is not going to change that, even though they are going to be a little bit weaker based on the raid things. And then really nothing changed with the Rus. That just happened to keep pace with the Chinese bombard. So all in all, I don't expect a whole lot to change in terms of like how the civs relate to each other in a tier list context, but how the game changes or how the game plays in team games is going to be a lot less water centric, and the water is going to last a lot less time than it does right now, being half as much fish. So you're going to have to transition. If you are going with a dock centered build, you're going to have to transition to farms and stuff and prepare for that a lot sooner. You used to have to do that at like the 20-minute mark. It's going to be at like the 12 to 13, 14-minute mark where you're going to have to start thinking about that, depending on the map and how much fish there are or how much fish there is at your disposal. So yeah, I don't expect a whole lot of changes in terms of tier list in team games, but the water and the fish changes and the bombards are probably the most significant things. And obviously animation canceling, that's probably the biggest thing, is you're not gonna have to sit here and worry about the animation canceling. That's probably the thing I like the most about this honestly, is like animation canceling was super annoying to face and have to do yourself, and it's good to just kind of address that and get it out of here. So that's probably the highlight for me. But yeah, that's gonna do it for this, and we should have the patch out later in the week, and I think all in all should be pretty positive changes. So as always, have a good one. Peace.